Hey there, By the Car Guy here, and today let's figure out why the new Titan's brakes are freaking out. So I was driving home in the Titan a couple days ago and this happened. Fantastic. That sound you heard is the sound of the ABS system going off. The only problem was, it was a bright sunny day and I was driving on dry concrete. So in all the different scenarios and all the different weather you can be driving, that would be the one scenario in which ABS should not be going off under any circumstance. So the fact that it is means there's something wrong with the system. So that's what we're going to check out today. Luckily, the ABS systems in these trucks is relatively simple. You have your ABS actuator, which is that big silver box with all your brake lines coming out. That goes off to a couple different things. It goes to your instrument cluster to show some lights. It has a brake fluid level switch, and it has a couple pressure switches, but then it goes off to 4 wheel speed sensors. So an incredibly simplistic view is that it watches the speed of each tire, and if one starts to slip, it will start to apply the brakes and try to give you control of the vehicle back because it thinks that it's losing control. It's meant to stop the brakes from locking up so you can maintain control of the vehicle in slick conditions. But it shouldn't be doing that on dry concrete. So today we're going to look at the system. We'll look up at the actuator. I highly doubt there's anything wrong with that. And then we're going to go and look at some of the wheel speed sensors. So let's go take a look. Now the ABS actuator in the Titan, or the control unit, is up in the upper right-hand corner of the engine bay. They're usually really easy to spot. They have a big hunk of aluminum and they got a bunch of brake lines coming out of them, so just look for that. They're also usually located very close to your brake reservoir and the master cylinder. So first and foremost, the easiest thing to check is your brake fluid level. So take a peek at that, make sure it's good. Mine's good, it's right there, right below the max. Generally, when this is low, you're gonna get a warning light on your dash, but it's always good to just check that. So if I know that that's good, let's take a look at this. And really, we would just check to see if there's any physical damage to it, if any brake fluid is leaking out of any of the connections, or if there's some issue with the electrical in it. Obviously, we seem fine here, and the connector is connected, and I'm gonna look for any damage on the loom. And honestly, everything looks good. There's nothing weird going on. Connection is tight, so I'm not really worried there. There's not a whole lot of diagnostics you can do to this without the fancy Nissan diagnostic software, but what we can do is go look at the wheel speed sensors and see what's going on down there. So underneath the vehicle, you're gonna have wires that go to each hub behind each wheel. Generally, it's gonna be the only actual wire that makes it. There's obviously a hose for the brake lines, but as far as actual electronics, there's usually only gonna be one wire that goes to the back. That's gonna be your wheel speed sensor wire. So let's go take a look at some of those. On the Titan, there's just one black wire here, and it kind of feeds down. Over here it loops, and then it comes down and it reaches the back of the hub. So we're just gonna wanna visually inspect these, make sure there's no obvious damage, make sure there's no tears in the insulation on the wire. Obviously, if it's not ripped out, everything over here looks pretty good. Both up front look pretty darn good. You can also come to the outside of the vehicle and kind of see where it kind of snakes up to the actual connector to the harness, which is probably the engine room harness, and just make sure that connection is secure as well. Push it in, make sure it's all right, make sure it's not sliding out or there's any debris or garbage in those. So no evidence of why it would be doing this just yet, but let's go check out the rears. All right, back here, it is the same deal. You'll see the same type of wire. They're gonna come from the hub in a thicker black wire, and then they're gonna connect into the main wiring harness. So let's take a look. So again, down here, you'll see it right there. That's where it goes into the hub there. Then it comes up here, wraps around, and heads up here. And, oh, well, there it is. Take a look at that. That is pretty damaged. Looks like it melted. All right, here's the deal. It looks like, yes, it looks like it's been touching the exhaust and melting on the exhaust. Yikes. Well, there's our culprit. All right, so I'm pretty confident that we found the issue. This exhaust is an aftermarket exhaust. I went and took a look at the other Titan. When the exhaust comes over the axle, it actually sort of deviates away from the rear of the wheel and then comes back over to the side of the bed where it exits. When you look at this exhaust, it goes over the axle, but it stays straight, so it's getting a lot closer to that wheel speed sensor line. So my guess is with all the slack in that wheel speed sensor wire, which obviously you need, right, for axle articulation and whatnot, but that spent enough time resting on the side of that exhaust that it actually melted through the casing, melted into the wire, and it was probably grounding it out, right? Because the exhaust is gonna be ground. So here's how we test that theory. I'm gonna tape this up, and I'm gonna pull it aside and kind of tuck it away from the actual exhaust, and then we'll go drive it and see if it works. So I taped up the wire as best I could, and then I sort of pulled it away from the exhaust, and that's gonna give us enough time to go do a little test drive. And obviously if the ABS stops freaking out, then I think we solved it. I also checked the last corner and that all looked good, so I'm pretty confident this is the issue. So we're gonna go drive it for a couple minutes, and if it's good, it's good. All right, I drove it and it's great. It drives just fine. If I'm being totally honest with you guys, as far as the actual wire is concerned, I'm probably just gonna leave it taped up. Pulling wheel speed sensors out of old hubs is pretty damn terrible. As far as preventing this down the road, I'm actually gonna work on the exhaust rather than working on the wire. The aftermarket exhaust that's on here is nice, it sounds good, but this is my daily driver, and I'm not a huge fan of aftermarket exhaust on my daily driver, especially when you hit the freeway and it starts to drone. Just not a fan of it. So I'm actually just gonna replace it and put a stock exhaust back on. I have a stock exhaust sitting around from another Titan, so I'm gonna slap that on, and that's gonna actually deviate away from the wheel speed sensor wire, and I won't have to worry about it anymore. All right, so I now love this truck 5 times more than I already did because that was the easiest exhaust job I've ever done. It helps that obviously since it's aftermarket, it's been installed more recently. It's not actually, 19, 20 years old, so getting it off was super simple, and then throwing the other one back on, just as easy. So now that tailpipe actually goes up and dodges our wire, and I literally can't even touch the two if I try. If I pull the wire towards the exhaust, it won't even touch. So for me, problem solved. If you happen to be in the same exact boat and you have an aftermarket exhaust that is melting your wire, then I'm sure they make extension kits because a lot of people jack trucks into the sky, right? So I'm sure they have ABS or wheel speed sensor wire extenders. If I find any, I'll throw them in the description below for you. And if you find that your wires are fine, I believe they have wheel speed sensor test kits, or you can check certain continuity. I'm not entirely sure, but if I do find a wheel speed sensor tester, I'll put that in the description below as well. I certainly hope this video helped you out. If it did, please scroll down, click that like button. Definitely subscribe for more content like this. You might be seeing the new Titan in upcoming videos. I'm really just gonna fix it as things go wrong, and it's actually in absolutely perfect condition, so you may not, but maybe we'll do some upgrades to it. If you wanna say thanks, you can buy me a beer. Just scroll down, click that super thanks button. And that's gonna be it for today. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one.